Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Today we have with us Prof Aijaz Ahmad, and we are going to discuss the bloody events in Egypt that has taken place recently. Aijaz, it does look like the army is on top and a lot of the old regime has re-emerged with the fall of Morsi government. How do you read the basic emergence of this army rule currently?
I think what happened, one of the things is that the Muslim Brotherhood, I think, vastly overread both their popularity and the level of mandate that they had. They also, I believe, thought that that they were now so powerful that the military elite could be pushed into a corner and they could just proceed as they wish. That is, I think, one great problem. And part of the reason, I think, is that they concentrated so heavily in consolidating their own rule, really a one-party state, whereas they should have really gone, for their own sake, I mean, from their own point of view, they should have done a very heavy dose of populism in terms of certain measures, welfare measures and economic redistribution measures and things of that kind, which is what the general populace was actually looking for, because the economic crisis is so deep. It's not just at the top. It is really in day-to-day life of Egypt. And when they saw that that is not what they are doing, they are bending down on their knees in front of the IMF and this, that, and the other. There are two or three things on which they should have moved. They should have been much more cautious in their relationship with Israel. They gave a carte blanche to the Americans in terms of that treaty. They thought that would keep the army happy, that would keep the Americans happy, and so on. So that is one populist plank that they vacated. But above all, the economic one, they were so devoted to creating a one-party state as rapidly as possible. And another factor into that is that the Egyptian army had watched Erdogan get rid of the whole of the military top brass in Egypt. In Turkey. Which is a sort of a version of the Muslim Brotherhood. That is the Turkish version of the Muslim Brotherhood. And when Muslim Brotherhood came in Egypt and got rid of some of the top generals, now that is that puts the armies back to the wall. At the same time, it was not radical enough. They brought al-Sisi to power, who had been the head of the Egyptian military intelligence, very close touch with Israelis and so on and so forth. A very powerful man and a very insidious man. You put them against the wall and sort of say, is there going to be another wave in which our heads are going to roll, which is how Erdogan had done it. So I think there are a lot of factors that went into it.
But what has happened is also this massacres in the two sit-ins, particularly the one near Nasser city. Large numbers of people have been killed, brutal shootings by all accounts, and also it seems that the mailed fist of the army is not very much visible, which for the future means that the threat to any mass movement is going to be there.
The army is a brutish force. Once it decides to move in and suppress the biggest mass organized political force, which is about 100 years old, it moves in full force with all the brutality. All right. And they have done it. And they are not looking for democratic legitimacy.
That's clear.
They are not looking for democratic legitimacy. And their narrative is, last time when all of you arose against Mubarak, we facilitated this democratic transition and you see what happened. So this time around, we are going to be around for a while, then we will give you democracy. But we are not looking for democratic legitimacy right now. So that is one aspect of it. They have also been given international guarantees that there will be no international repercussions against them if they do so. But then at the same time, there are immense forces inside Egyptian society by all counts who are supporting this. Now what has happened is that they have killed God knows how many, 700 so far?
Anything between 700 to 1,000, we don't know.
Who knows? They've killed large numbers of people and in a fairly brutish manner. There is no public outpouring of anger. The only people who are coming to their demonstrations are their hardcore Muslim Brotherhood people. This is extraordinary in a country which for the last 2.5 years has been having hundreds of thousands, a million, whatever, in the streets all the time from all walks of life. Here what has actually happened is that the masses of Egypt, the people, generally the people of Egypt, they have not been able to mobilize. And that is what I think the army is calculating. That is what this brutality is about. That before they're able to organize, let's just go with a full fist and eliminate them.
Other thing which I think we need to look at is there's been a lot of talk that the Americans have been supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, supporting the army. It seemed that the Americans wanted really a condition where the Muslim Brotherhood would be their one ally and the army would be the other ally. In that sense, they were sort of not really bothered about who wins out if this confrontation takes place, as long as one of their parties win. Do you read it like that?
Americans are past masters at this. They have done it now for 70 years. They have very strong channels to all political forces in a country that are of any great substantial weight, unless they are people, they're enemies of the United States. Anybody who's willing to be friends with them, they have extensive ones. Secondly, they always work on contingency plans. When that dam broke in Egypt against Mubarak, for about 2 weeks they tried to salvage the Mubarak regime, even to the extent of asking the army to put Suleiman in their place and so on. When they found that that game they could not win, they very masterfully decided not to have the army come in right away. They said, fine. Democratic transition, Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood comes in, makes a mess of itself. If they had not made a mess of themselves, Americans might have given them more time. Now, they're both clients and they're both friends. But with the army, they have a very different relationship. This is an army that has tortured hundreds, possibly thousands of people for the Americans, Islamicists. With the Muslim Brotherhood, it's not going to do. There are certain things that only the army does for them. So if for political reasons they have to have a Muslim Brotherhood rule, that is fine. Then there is a whole question of their regional alignments. One of the mysteries about which we still don't know enough is the state of the play between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. This meteoric rise of Qatar and this sudden collapse of Qatar as a regional power. Just how is that playing? And suddenly, Muslim Brotherhood is running Egypt with Qatari money, and it's being overthrown by Saudi money. And Americans are sitting pretty, it's not costing them anything.
Even the clients are being run through their clients. Other clients.
Through wealthier clients. The powerful clients are being run by the wealthier clients, So that's how Americans play it.
But one thing is very clear, that their long-term play in Syria, which meant all this coming together with Muslim Brotherhood as the linchpin of the opposition to Assad, that part of the game will be somewhat affected in all this.
I think one of the problems that happened is that in Syria, things started moving very much out of the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood and into the hands of those Salafists which were being financed and weaponized from Qatar.
And who are also very close to what they call the Al-Qaeda.
Qatar, I think, was overplaying its hands. And Americans, behind the Americans, Israelis, were very unhappy about the fact that Qatar has become now the main patron of Hamas. That they were the ones who were making the shift from Muslim Brotherhood to the Salafists in Syria, shift of power. That they were now much more active with the Salafists in Iraq, and so on. So this whole shift, that for a period of time Americans and Israelis are working with Qatar, and Qatar rises as this power in Tunisia, in Libya, especially in Libya, and all that. And then they realized that Muslim Brotherhood is one thing, but there are these changing faces of things.
Army is fully in control of Egypt as it stands, and it is very clear we are back to a quasi-Mubarak era. It's now been announced that Mubarak will probably be released. A lot of the old Mubarak era faces have come back. Things not good for Egyptians, and particularly for those, as you said, who took in large numbers to the streets for the last 2 years, that having endorsed initially the coup against Morsi, now they actually have lost a complete
You see,
role.
These are, the political immaturity, shall we say, of these groupings which are leaderless, which are organizationless, which have no political experience, who commanded so much of the power. They were the ones so keen to have a common front with the Muslim Brotherhood. They were the ones who were saying Muslim Brotherhood has changed its colors, it has become a liberal democratic organization, etc., etc. Same people now are sending petitions to the United Nations to declare Muslim Brotherhood as an international terrorist organization. So these youth groups, yes, Tamarud, which is now sort of emerged under the name of Tamarud, but it's essentially the same coalition of youth groups.
No, some of the youth groups like April 6th have dissociated themselves clearly from that.
Except that I don't think of April 6th as one of those youth groups.
Those
much more organized political
and they
groups.
came with the textile strike and
They
so
came
on.
out with it,
They
but
really,
surprising,
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
very different kind
Social composition.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it's
talking of the...
And it's also clear they were with the Tabarud on asking Morsi to go,
Sure.
but did not endorse Sisi's call that you come to the streets and endorsed our action
That's
that
right.
we are going to do against Morsi. They
Yeah,
clearly
yeah,
said,
yeah.
you want to preserve the state, it's your responsibility. Don't ask us to endorse this call.
That's right.
But
That's
Tamarud
right.
did.
That's right. So, again what you're seeing is that because it has been that kind of coalition, there's no coordination among these forces. Various forces take whatever positions strike them at that time to be the right one. A lot of these youth groups, which were aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood during that period of anti-Mubarak things, whatever the proportions and numbers may be, but in the anti-Mubarak movement and immediately thereafter, you saw that demonstrations began to shift from their epicenter to Friday prayers, that after the Friday prayers there will be this grand demonstration and so on. And the symbolic space from where you organize these things, when they shift, you realize that this is a shift of leadership of the movement. That is part of the problem. But let me say that in my view, the army, from its own standpoint, I think is overplaying its hands. Full restoration of the Mubarak regime will cost them the support of very many of the liberals with whose support they have actually done it. And what you will have, again, is that kind of regime with no social basis at all in a country which has seen these eruptions. So if they fully restore that regime, then it becomes just Mubarak regime phase 2. You alienate everybody, not only the Islamicists, but the liberals and this, that, and the other. What happens 6 months from now, a year from now in the streets? I don't know.
As of today, army on top, but nevertheless, the portents for restoration of Mubarak regime could show that this phase also may not last too long.
Right.
One thing is clear, that the Muslim Brotherhood staked big and lost, partly because of their own haste to install, as you said, a kind of majoritarian one-party rule instead of what would be the normal rules of democracy. You win in elections, but you try to take at least others with you. We'll come back, Aijaz, on this, because the things in Egypt now have taken a particular configuration, and it will take some time before we can see the consequences of what's happening now.
Yeah, quite right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.